of his book here, which
Right.
I'll hold up.
Right.
2,000 to 3,000 Palestinians were made refugees during the second stage of the flight. Here's the book in front of you,
Yeah.
page 256. Can you read what the sentence says?
Well, let me read you what I say in my book. In some areas, Arab commanders.
Please
I'm quoting
don't read
from
the whole
Morris. No,
paragraph.
I'm just reading. In some, let me put the context. Chomsky says that that he says Morris does not believe that any Arab leaders told the Palestinians to leave. And I say, in some areas, I quote from Morris, in some areas, Arab commanders ordered the villages to evacuate to clear the ground for military purposes to prevent surrender. More than half a dozen villages, etc., were abandoned during these months as a result of such orders. Elsewhere in East Jerusalem and in many villages around the country, the Arab commanders ordered women, old people, and children to be sent away out of harm's way. Indeed, psychological preparation for the removal of the dependents had begun in 47-48, when the Arab High Command and the Arab League had periodically endorsed such a move when contemplating the future of Palestine. And I say, therefore, Chomsky is simply wrong when he says that there's no evidence, and he says again at another point, nobody today believes that any of the refugees were told to leave. And so I dispute that by quoting Morris himself.
You seem to have an obsession with Mr. Chomsky, but he's not here. I'm here. Let's look at the next sentence.
I thought I was going to be debating Chomsky today.
Let's look at the next sentence. Please, Mr. Dershowitz, this is serious.
I agree with you.
Read the next sentence. Morris estimates, in your book, I have it right in front of me, the next sentence.
Morris estimates that between 2,000 and 3,000 Arabs fled their homes during this phase of the Arab-initiated fighting.
Okay, can you please read what Mr. Morris wrote?
Well, no, you're talking about one...
Please read what he wrote.
If I have the whole book, I will find for you, if you want to take time...
Norm Finkelstein, can you, if you want the
3,000 people led during this phase.
Can you read the sentence?
Okay, I'm looking at page 256 of Benny Morris's book, Righteous Victims, A History of the Zionist-Arab Conflict.
He's referring to phase 2 now, the same one as you. Go ahead.
And you're talking about right over here.
Altogether, yeah.
Altogether, about 200,000 to 300,000 Arabs fled their homes during the second stage of the Exodus.
There's a big difference between 2 and 3,000 and 2 and 300,000. Now, you could check this many times, Mr. Dershowitz, but you're really going to have to pay the $10,000.
No.
And I hope you'll allow me to I hope you'll allow me to earmark it for Jenin. I would like to give it to Jenin.
Let's be sure what the context is of this.
I know the context.
We're talking about a variety of
This is not the OJ
phases.
trial. This is not the OJ trial. We're not going to play a game.
Well,
we're not playing a game now.
Is your point that you're citing that what you're saying, Norm Finkelstein, is in Alan Dershowitz's book, The Case for Israel? He says 2 to
3,000, and it's 2 to 300,000.
Your response to that,
I argue that 700,000 Arabs.
Don't change the subject,
Mr.
Dershowitz.
That's changing the subject.
We're
I
talking
argue
about
that
phase 2, April through June.
Arabs.
Please don't play this game.
Obviously, the phrase 2 to 3,000 Arabs refers either to a sub-phase or is a typographical error.
This is why lawyers have a bad reputation. Because you're playing a game now. I've read the book twice. In fact, Mr. Dershowitz,
do I ever dispute that 700? Do I ever dispute that hundreds of thousands of people
in fact, I've read the book 6 times because I read Joan Peters 4 times. So if you add the 4 times to Joan Peters,
does she make this point?
With the
By the way,
for you, it's 6 times.
Does she make this point?
No.
Of course she doesn't make this point. Now,
let's go to the other.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I'm going to interrupt because stations have to make their point, which is they have to identify. They have to identify themselves. We'll come back, and if you can stay with us for the show, we will continue this discussion. And our next guest, will ask him to wait, and we will do an interview after the program. I think this is too important. We're talking to Alan Dershowitz. His new book is called The Case for Israel. He is debating Norm Finkelstein, his books, The Holocaust Industry, An Image and Reality of the Israel-Palestine Conflict. Stay with us. You are listening to Democracy Now! That's the late Frank Lowe on saxophone. I'm Amy Goodman, and we're talking with Professor Alan Dershowitz. His new book is called The Case for Israel. Mario Cuomo writes on the back of it, Alan Dershowitz's detailed and penetrating analysis of the issues that fuel the continuing war in Israel should be read by everyone. Norman Finkelstein's book, The Holocaust Industry, has a recommendation on the back by Raoul Hilberg, who is the leading Holocaust historian in this country. And he says, when I read Finkelstein's book at the time of its appearance, I was in the middle of my own investigations. I came to the conclusion he was on the right track. I refer now to the part of the book that deals with the claims against Swiss banks, and I'm jumping ahead. He says, I am by no means the only one who in the coming months or years will totally agree with Finkelstein's breakthrough. Okay.
So let me focus on the 2000 or 3000. This is such an obvious point when you think about it for a second. What is the context I'm arguing? I'm arguing that lots and lots of Arabs, in contradistinction to what Chomsky said, were told to leave by their Arab commanders. Obviously, it's in the interest of that argument to maximize the number who would leave. Only an idiot would deliberately minimize the number who's leave.
Let's refrain from ad hominem attacks.
No. I'm talking about myself.
Okay.
I'm talking about myself now.
Okay.
I would have been an idiot had I used 2,000 when the actual number was 200 to 300. If you wanted to make an accusation, you would say, instead of saying 200 to 300, he said 400 to 500,000. Remember the argument. The argument I'm making is that lots of the Palestinian refugees who left as the result of orders from their leaders during this period of time. So my incentive, if we take Mr. Finkelstein, would be to exaggerate the number. Now he accuses me of reducing the number by 100-fold. Obviously, there are only two possible explanations for that.
For factual errors.
Why would anyone make a factual error that would hurt their position?
Mr. Dershowitz,
it's the
with all due
stupidest
respect,
allegation.
Mr. Dershowitz,
Right?
with all due respect, I cannot understand for the life of me why someone with your reputation and with your accomplishments would cobble together a fraud. That, to me, is the most perplexing question.
Let me ask you a direct
Leaving
question.
aside,
Let me ask you a direct question.
Let me just say something. We only have 10 minutes. We want to go to content.
I do, but I want to ask one direct question. Am I right or am I
Mm-hmm.
wrong that it would serve the interest of my argument
There is
to
no argument.
overstate rather than to understate
Mr. Dershowitz, there
that
is no
figure?
argument. There are no arguments in your book.
No,
Your book is a collection
minute.
of fraud. Falsification,
let me give you the argument.
and nonsense.
Well, let me set out the argument. So this is an answer on the merits. Here's the argument.
I don't want to discuss your
we're going to close both mics
Here's the
here.
argument.
We're closing both microphones, okay? We're going to go through this in a civilized way over the next 10 minutes. You have laid out a challenge, Professor Dershowitz, on Scarborough Country, the program on MSNBC. You said if anyone can find a factual error in the book, we're not talking spelling errors, that you will give $10,000. Sorry?
Yes, as I said, I'm prepared to do that. Now,
okay, now I'm going to interrupt.
Right.
This is a major challenge.
It is.
You've put it out on television. Norman Finkelstein, you have laid out one error. Whoever's interested served. Who's ever interested served. You did respond.
No.
You said 2,000 to 3,000, quoting citing Benny Morris, the Israeli historian. In fact, he said 200,000 to 300,000 Arabs. Now,
and let me make the point that I do make an argument. Here's the argument I make. I make the argument that the issue is a complex one of the refugees, and that in fact many of the refugees of the 700,000.
But you're citing Benny Morris.
Wait. Of course.
And he made a different point than you did.
He made a point that strengthens my argument.
But it's wrong in your book. Whether or not it strengthens, whether or not it serves your argument.
Let me be very clear. If you I do make an argument. My argument is a very serious one. My argument is that many of the Palestinians were told to leave by their commanders. If in fact 200,000 were told to leave instead of 2,000, that strengthens my argument considerably. That is an argument that I make. If the book says 2,000 to 3,000, there are only two explanations. Either it is a typographical error, or I have to check the book.